Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven and the Blunicorn Ultima Evolution build. My name is Humble, and today we've made a huge milestone. As you can see, the car is finally on the ground. We've jacked it up, pulled the trestles out from under it, and we finally have touchdown. As you can see, this thing sits super low. It's hard to really put that into perspective, but that's the seat sitting next to the car, and that just illustrates how low this thing sits. Just crazy. I mean, the engine itself is taller on the stand than the top of the car. So we've cleared out the interior. Time to drill some holes for the seats. We're working on buttoning up. Well, I'm working on buttoning up the mirrors, and we have the doors over here which need reassembly, but those have all been painted and touched up. Here we have Geoff helping out again.
How's it going?
He was nice enough to put black etching primer on all of the underside of the fiberglass, which looks much nicer now. We painted this up yesterday, and today we're pulling all the tape off. And I mentioned before, blacking out the edge of the trim. This is what it looks like before you go through that process. So it doesn't look as sharp or as finished. Not that anyone would ever see this part of the panel, but in the places that you do find, or that you would be able to see, like here, the underside of the fiberglass, which would be in the engine bay, it does make a huge difference in the perceived quality. So we will black that out and get that going. And while he's working on that, I'm going to work on getting the seat in the car so it can decide where some of the human interfaces will go. So things like the buttons, additional accessories, so 12-volt power or a cigarette lighter adapter. Not that I smoke, but there's plenty of accessories that are driven from that need to go into the car. So having that in a convenient spot, but not a spot that's in the way, is pretty important. There's still plenty of wiring to work on, but now that the car's on the ground, we can drop the motor into the car and figure out where all of our motor or engine wiring needs to go. So that's all on our short list. Alright, so here's a look at one of the mirrors. We've pulled it off the door. As you can see, we painted the inside with black etching primer, which does change the outside hue a little bit. It's hard to tell here in the garage, but outside it's like the saturation has been turned up a little bit. But you can see we've removed the mechanisms here for the powered mirrors to paint the inside of this, and this will be hard to do one-handed, but you paint up to the edge and leave a little bit of the edge, and this is just a black paint pen, and you can trim right around the outside of the opening. And if this will focus, you can see the nice crisp edge all the way around. And we didn't just do that for the mirrors, we've done it for the center tub, for the doors, for the side pods, basically every piece of the body. And it keeps it looking very nice and very sharp. Much better than I think using or just leaving it rather unpainted, or trying to paint and then removing it or polishing it off the edge. So it just makes it look very, very clean. So right now I'm working on reassembling the mirrors, and then the mirrors themselves can go back on the doors. So we have the car on the ground now. You can see just how low it sits in the front. Rear, of course, is sitting up because the engine's not in it yet. Right now we have the center tub on the chassis. This isn't the permanent install. We just put the glass in to have somewhere to put the glass. But right now what I'm doing is marking out the location for the center dash pod, which will hold our display, our gauge display. You can see that I have both seats in and mounted, and just how tight the cockpit will be. Fire extinguisher is down on the floor. That's pretty close to its final position. It'll sit something like that. It intrudes a little bit on the passenger footwell, but this car's not about them, is it? You can see just down and back there the pedal setup. Basically the driver's leg will be kind of right up here against the fire bottle. I'm trying to place the bottle such that it's not going to impede too much on the driver's leg, and you can kind of brace against the side of the tank. That being said, you have to be careful about doing that because you will bruise your leg. I know from experience trying to brace against lateral forces, bruising your sides, your legs, your knees, that sort of thing. So I want to have it close enough that you can sort of brace against, but not in such a way that it'll do the driver any harm. So there's that. Back here behind the seats with the rear bulkhead, that panel is not in, but you can see just how tight the rear seat, the seats sit to the back. So basically this is the rear bulkhead. The engine is, I think, 3 to 4 inches behind this panel, like on this side. And then the seat back is just on the other side of that panel. So what I mentioned before about insulation, you see just how important that is. We have these new floor panels in here, which help block off the sides of the bottom of the engine bay. I haven't done this one, and I may or may not do this triangle here, just because the engine pan, the oil pan down here, and the bell housing for the transmission over there. With the transmission inverted, the whole engine sits lower, and this cross brace here really marks out the lowest point of the car. So I may or may not build a shield, which has to be kind of a 3D type of space to clear all that, but it won't hang down more than this bar here. And then ditto for this space, or is it this area here, and then this area here down underneath. This is a flat plane. This one is not back in this area here because, again, of that lower brace. So I do want to put a flat pan in this area, but I don't need to do that now. I can do that later on down the road. But that would feed a rear diffuser if I were to put one on the car. According to other folks who race these cars, you can put a diffuser on an Ultima, but it greatly increases rear downforce, and that's not an area that's lacking on these cars. Typically it's the front. Here up in the front of the car, these access panels, we'll get back to the into the wiring and the relays and the fuses. That'll be all prettied up. This isn't the final install. The front kind of the front of the side pod rather, there's another beauty panel that sits here that needs to go in, and then here across the front, the wiper mount will go here. There's actually a few holes that need to be put into this panel for wiring and plumbing. Plumbing because the washer bottle sits over here and so on. I still need to install our brake pressure sensors, which will go in these lines. And then on this side, down in this area, I'm going to put the, I'm going to relocate rather the AC receiver dryer, which would normally sit back here in the engine bay. Normally it sits just on the side of the firewall here, but it needs to sit between the evaporator, which is here under the dash, and the condenser, which is up here in front of the radiator. So it doesn't make sense to have it all the way in the engine bay. So I'm going to try and put it down here in this side pod, which should simplify plumbing, but all these lines that come pre-made for the car are either too short or too long, and so I will need to source more of those AC lines and then crimp my own ends, etc.